Minister, Senator Waters has the call.
All laws are always under review, Senator Heffernan.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Minister. Hi there, folks. I have some questions about the Exploration Development Incentive. Mr Heffernan, can I direct those to you? Great. So as I understand it, it's a $100 million program which provides a refundable tax offset to small mining companies for exploration. And
so to the investors in the small mining companies.
Okay, so that if the company doesn't make a profit, it can still get a credit which is then cashed in by the shareholders.
Which mining companies in the early stages of exploration usually don't make profits. You don't make profits until you get into production. So it is very much a measure that is targeted at the junior end in order to facilitate opportunity and growth down the track.
Mr Heffernan, did I accurately capture the operation of that policy? Just want to make sure I've got it right.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. That seems like an effective subsidy to me. Would you categorise it that way?
Well, it's an explicit election commitment.
It's not a subsidy, Senator Waters. It is a tax incentive. It's essentially it's a different way of charging the tax. It goes to the timing of when the tax is going to be paid, because eventually, once the company does become profitable, it will pay company tax. Obviously, the more companies are successful, the more company tax revenue will be able to rise, and this is an attempt to structure a tax incentive such that we give more companies the opportunity to be successful into the future.
Okay, so we have a tax incentive that's not a subsidy. Is that what you're contending, Minister?
Well, it's not a subsidy.
Well, it's a timing issue, and that normally what would happen is the loss would be trapped in the company. The loss would be carried forward, and when the company eventually makes a profit, they can offset the loss against that. What this measure will allow is that, if you like, the value of that loss to flow out to the relevant shareholders
earlier than they otherwise might.
So it's a timing issue.
Okay. What is your definition of subsidy, just for the record, Mr Heffernan? If I could get your view on that, rather than the minister, perhaps. I think the experts might have a more informative view.
I will take the prerogative of answering these sorts of questions on behalf of the government. The subsidy involves a payment from government. And this particular policy does not involve a payment from government. As Mr Heffernan has just said, it really goes to the timing on when losses become deductible. Is it at a time when the company is fully operational and profitable, or is there an opportunity for losses to be recognised in terms of the treatment for income tax purposes at an earlier stage? And this is obviously in the hands of investors. There is an opportunity here through this policy to recognise losses that have been incurred earlier than otherwise might have been. It does not involve a payment from government as such.
And just for clarification, presumably down the track that means there'd be a payoff for the government in terms of its revenue, because losses that would have been claimed later won't be claimed later, assuming they're making profits.
Obviously the objective here is, and one of the big challenges we've got is that the resources sector activity now is fundamentally based on exploration that happened many years ago. There are fewer new discoveries now. It is a high risk area of operation, mining exploration, resource exploration, and obviously the policy objective here is to. This is part of our plan to build a stronger, more prosperous economy. Because if you've got more prosperous, profitable mining companies, they will end up paying more company tax.
So, Mr Heffernan, if that company then does not become profitable, what happens to that effectively avoided liability? How will the government then recoup that if profit isn't made? So isn't that really a deferral of the risk, that the government's now assuming the risk by paying that credit up front?
So essentially the investor is able to realise the value of the loss earlier. So in realising the value of that loss, the potential tax benefit that they may otherwise be able to utilise in the future, either to offset against other income, or if that enterprise becomes profitable, doesn't exist for the taxpayer and ultimately for the investor.
Right. Okay, well, can I ask now whether Treasury had any input into the development of that policy?
That was an election commitment, Senator.
So this is a
I realise
policy that we
but does
developed
that
in opposition.
mean that you had some input or not?
No. I mean,
Sorry,
by
am I not
definition,
allowed
we
to
were the
ask that?
opposition when we put our election commitments together, and we didn't have the privilege of being able to work as closely with Treasury in opposition as we do now in government, as is, I would have thought, not unusual. So the policy was developed by the coalition in opposition. It was fully costed at the time, of course, with the assistance of the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Well, you've had 9 months since then. Did you not seek Treasury input into it? That's my question.
Of course. Well, that was a different question, Senator Waters, with all due respect. No. The question was very clearly put. The question was very clearly put. The question that was put was whether Treasury was involved in the development of the policy, and manifestly Treasury was not involved in the development of the policy because it's a policy that we developed in opposition, as we were the aspiring new government, but not yet the government.
Thanks, Minister.
Since then, of course, now that it is a budget measure, you would be safe to assume that the government made a decision. The government made a decision based on relevant advice from all its agencies.
Senator, Senator Wong, Senator Wong, you do not have the call. And you can be condescending as much as you like. Senator Waters, you have the call. Please ignore the objections, the interjections, and ask your questions.
Because people don't want to support you.
In the previous 9 months, has Treasury advised on the effect or the implications of the exploration development incentive?
So with any election commitment, we then work with, obviously do our job in helping the government implement its commitment. So the issue that we're talking about is one that's been, I think it's fair to say, has been very well canvassed in Australian public policy for a number of years. And so once it becomes government policy, we're in a position to work with a range of stakeholders, so affected mining companies, to understand how best to put it in place. Because as you appreciate, the nature of an election commitment, I mean, they're quite varied. Some are relatively detailed, some will be more, this is the policy that the incoming government wants to achieve, that the government wants to achieve, and there may be some issues at the edges about how best to go about that. The exploration and development incentive, like many others, we're working through that process, and accordingly you see in the budget papers, so in budget paper 2 with a measure description, there is a revenue, a change to the revenue which
page 215
in aggregate doesn't affect the $100 million, but does have sort of profiling effect. Okay. And that's as a result of some discussions with the industry and, of course, the discussions with ministers.
Okay. Are you aware of any modelling?
Sorry. I might just add, I mean, so you'd be aware that there was a policy design paper put out in March 2004 and public consultations on that.
Yeah, thank you. Are you aware of any modelling, either by your department or in other areas of the government, as to whether or not that $100 million would be more efficiently spent in supporting other junior players in other non-mining industries?
No, I'm not aware of any.
No. So why is it just the mining industry getting a leg up, given that there's lots of costs to enter an industry as a junior player in other non-mining industries?
I think you're asking the Treasury official an opinion.
Perhaps you might share your learned opinion with us, Senator Cormann.
I'm very happy if you're directing the question to me. What I would say to you is that this is a particularly risky area of business where we've got particular challenges. And this is recognition. This policy is recognition of the particular challenges faced by that part of the economy. We obviously have got other policies to encourage growth in other parts of the economy. I can't believe, Senator Wong, that you would take objection to what is a direct and relevant answer to a very specific question. You might disagree with the answer, but it is directly relevant.
Listen to what we were saying.
So, Minister,
Rich Wilson was raising with the chair the abusive process that is your continued speeches from that chair.
Well, can I say, if that is a point of order, I haven't heard a more direct and responsive answer to
And
a
concise.
question than that one all day. So,
Chair, my point of order is we've heard the same thing 5 times.
No, well, you actually haven't. There was
or
a
maybe
very
the questioner should think about whether she wants to ask it.
There was a specific question.
I've already heard.
Minister, you haven't got the call. Senator Bush-Wilson's making a point.
You're not the
There
chair,
is no
Senator.
point.
You are actually
There is
not
no
the
point of
chair.
order. Senator
Actually, I
Waters,
think I have
please
the
ask
call.
your question.
Thanks, everyone. So you mentioned that it's a particularly risky industry, and I note that the government apparently has an ideological opposition to supporting industry in certain sectors, but doesn't seem to have a consistency of position when it comes to the mining industry. So I'm interested in Mr. Hefferon, if the minister or the relevant government folk ever asked for advice about whether this policy would effectively prop up a marginal undertaking, despite its apparent objections to propping up other non-mining marginal undertakings.
Well, sorry, I've got to interpose here because you are asking Mr. Hefferon for an opinion, and I don't accept the characterisation that this is about propping up a marginal undertaking. This is a recognition through the tax system that there are significant losses incurred in pursuing these sorts of opportunities long before these sorts of ventures generate any revenue, let alone any profits. And if we don't pursue these sorts of policies, then we will not be able to reach our full potential.
Well, there's a point of order, Minister.
You need to.
I am. If you don't interrupt me, I'd be able to answer the question.
You actually, behave like
Senator Wong, there is a point of order, and I will deal with it. Senator Wish-Wilson, the minister is responding to the question. If the question is asked over and over again, you will get the same answer. And so I don't think there is a point of order.
It was a different question.
Well, you might not like the answer, Senator Wish-Wilson.
We're intelligent people here. We don't have to be told the same thing 6 times.
Well, you don't have to ask the same question 6 times either.
It was a very different question, Senator.
Well, I disagree.
Mr. Hefferon, how will the department police the success of the policy? What benchmarks will you use to enable whether it's working or not?
We don't police the success of policies, Minister. I mean, the sense of policing something, I mean, there's a...
Assess the effect of then, if you prefer.
Assess the impact.
So, and I think the industry department people yesterday covered this off. There is a review of the scheme built into the design of the scheme, which will assess the effectiveness of it in terms of meeting its objectives, and I think they provided some answers around that yesterday. I mean, in the context of the Treasury Industry Department partnership in delivering this sort of incentive, we would largely leave that to them. They know about the sector. Their understanding of the sector is far superior to ours.
Just a point of clarification, Chair. I actually asked the question to the industry department the other day, and they didn't have the answers. So I'd be interested to know if they have put something in on notice since then. But they had basically said they had no structure around how they were going to assess this, whether it was going to be reviewed, and what were the KPIs for the. They said they had nothing. So I'd be very interested to see more detail on that.
So you're nodding, you're indicating you take
So
that on notice.
you've seen this?
Well, I think I'm not sure whether they took it on notice, but I think it's a question better.
They said they
to
hadn't
them.
done it yet. That was actually, if I'll have to check Hansard, but I'm pretty sure that was the
I mean,
response.
the measure hasn't been put in place yet, and then the assessment of its effectiveness would happen after 5 years.
Well, so there's the issue about the delay in the payments, but because of the way the tax system interacts with the expenditure of the funds. But yes, it would occur the assessment of its effectiveness would by necessity be some way off.
So if the question was about what has been put in place to assess the effectiveness, they'd be saying, well, they wouldn't be able to answer that because nothing would yet have been put in place. But the idea or the proposal that the system would have an evaluation down the track when there was sufficient information to have it evaluated.
Because my concern was about the potential rorting of the system. Lots of small exploration companies like to mine their shareholders, and I'd hate to see them mining taxpayers as well. It's a very high risk industry. No, that's my personal experience, so that was my concern.
We understand your point.
Okay.
Senator Waters, do you have any more questions? Because I do want to get back to Senator Wong.
I do, thank you. I'll be quick. You mentioned the discussion paper earlier. What was the consultation process? Was it simply the mining industry players consulted, or was there a broader consultation
So there was a broader public consultation. It
Okay.
ran from the 13th of March 2014 to the 4th of April 2014. And then we ran, in addition to seeking public feedback on the policy design of the incentive, we also met with specific groups. We met particularly with, as you would expect, organisations such as AMEC who have views on the proposal, and we've received 28 submissions.
Are they public?
No, they're not. Well, potentially they may be public at some point, but that's a matter for government, Senator.
Oh, what's the rationale for not making them public?
Senator, when certainly from a tax policy point of view, and it probably happens with others as well, when we go out with a consultation and a paper goes out and people make submissions, what tends to happen is that those submissions are made public all at once. So there's not sort of a real-time flow of submissions into the public domain. Often when an organisation makes a submission, or sometimes an organisation makes a submission, it also makes it public itself. But our practice has been that we keep all the submissions. If particular people making submissions want to make them public, that's their prerogative. And then when the decision time comes, the government then decides to usually put those out publicly.
Well, it's been 2 months since the consultation finished, and it's obviously been several weeks since the budget. Why are they not public yet, those submissions?
Oh, it'd be when the typically when the decision point, like when the legislation's introduced or something like that.
Okay.
That's a pretty standard practice across the board.
You mentioned that you'd met with specific groups and you named AMEC. Were there any renewable energy industry operators or indeed manufacturing folk consulted specifically?
Is the question, did we meet with any renewable energy? No, we did not.
Did they provide any submissions?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ask them to, or alert them that the consultation was open?
Well, it's a public consultation process. So
The way these consultations generally work is that a release is put out to announce that there's an open consultation period, and people self-identify as to whether
And was that done? There was that alert, as you call it, put out?
That's right, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So we would expect all those people who have an interest to, decide to have a look and make a contribution where they think it's
Right, but you didn't make specific efforts to meet with any of the non-mining sector about the effect of this subsidy?
In an ideal world, we have the resources to do that, but in the world we're in, we put the information out. We make sure that the access to the information is as broad as possible, so any alerts, people become members of various things to get alerted, and we leave it to others to decide how they're going to allocate their time and resources.
I might put the rest of mine on notice. Thanks, Chair.
That'd be appreciated. Senator Wong.
Thank you.